for the FX Commodities market update. Now let's get a summary of the trading week on the Commodities Exchange. There was a mixed performance across key indicators. So turnover, that increased by 49.35% from 3.83 billion naira to 5.72 billion naira. There was also an increase of 54.40% in volume of contracts traded. Also observed is a decrease in the number of deals that traded. That was by 22.31%, closing at 94, while the FX Commodity Index fell by 0.16%, closing the week at 471.42 index points. The FX Export Index performed negatively, dropping from 221.03 points to 220.99 points. The volume of contracts traded, that's volume across maize, sorghum, and soybean, that increased. And now for across the commodities, we see ginger and sesame that maintained at 812 naira 23 kobo. And while the others declined, with sorghum falling by 2.58% and closing at 262 naira 63 kobo. We see soybean that fell by 1.07%, closing at 331 naira 44 kobo. Cashew nut, that's down by 0.49% and closing at 610 naira 69 kobo. Paddy rice fell by 0.21%. It closed at 318 naira 82 kobo per kilogram, and cocoa fell by 0.12% and closed at 1,884 naira 21 kobo. Across grain commodities, we see maize that lost by 0.19% and closed at 227 naira 39 kobo per kilogram. And taking the conversation forward now, see the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria recently passed into law the Investment and Securities Bill. Let's get a sense of how this bill impacts commodities, investments, and trading. Joining me now is Oladipupo Mutiu, legal analyst at AFEX, joining me from our Abuja studio. Great to have you on the show.
Good morning, Ladi. Thank you for having me here today.
So tell me now, what's the purpose of this Investments and Securities Bill amendment? You know, what's the amendment willing to achieve that was lost out in the previous one?
Essentially, the Investment and Securities Bill is a proposed amendment of the current legal framework that governs the investment ecosystem in Nigeria, which is the Investment and Securities Act 2007. This bill is a child of necessity, born out of the fundamental need to adequately protect investors in the ecosystem and, of course, efficiently regulate the Nigerian capital market in order to mitigate and manage systemic risk. And there's also the crucial importance to provide stringent punishment for operators of Ponzi schemes in Nigeria. As a matter of background story, according to a recent report of Noreen Berger in 2022, which postulated that in just the last 6 years only, investors in Nigeria have lost a whopping sum of 300 billion naira to investment scam. And the most notable and notorious among them all is the AMM Ponzi scheme, which occurred in 2015, in which over 3 million investors lost a whopping sum of 80 billion naira to this investment scam. And I believe you would agree with me that these occurrences and figures are quite worrisome and at the same time indigestible. And it is upon these premises that SEC, as the apex regulator of the Nigerian capital market, has come up with this bill in order to ferociously combat and prevent the recurrence of these abominable investment activities.
And definitely, the ISB is a response to gaps that existed within the global and Nigerian economic landscape. Could you describe some of these gaps?
So, talking about identified gaps and lacunas, the first point that belabors in mind is the fact that the current legal framework, which is the Investment and Securities Act 2007, is quite incredibly scanty and silent with the needed legal framework to govern the affairs of participants in commodities trading or commodities exchange. And on the flip side, this proposed law, the ISB 2023, provides an entirely distinct and elaborate legal framework to govern the activities and the affairs of commodities exchanges. And it does that with an abundance of crystal clarity and precision. And to create some examples, this bill provides provisions that relate to the registration of a commodities exchange, the responsibilities of a commodity exchange, the mode of appointment and dismissal of a CEO and other principal officers of a commodity exchange, even up to the particular commodities that are prohibited from being listed on a commodity exchange, amongst a host of other issues. Now, for the second point, which is of equivalent importance with the first point, is the due recognition that has been accorded to warehouse receipts as a tradable financial instrument. A warehouse receipt essentially is a document that shows and guarantees the quality and quantity of commodities deposited in a particular warehouse. So apart from these documents being a mere evidence of proprietary right, it has now been recognized as a document that can be traded on an exchange as a financial instrument. So it can move from one trader, it can move from one hand to another without even the buyer having to see the physical commodities. So it constitutes some sort of derivative. And another functionality or purported advantage of this warehouse receipt is the fact that it can be exploited to access credit facility from either a financial institution or cooperative society. And how do I mean? Now, owing to the fact that every warehouse receipt is backed up by an actual underlying assets, underlying commodities existing in a warehouse, that commodity will serve as collateral to the financial institution that wants to extend credit facility to the farmer or trader. And that will give the financial institution the confidence to extend the loan to the trader, knowing fully well that if you default in the payment of your loan, the financial institution will have the liberty and legitimacy to take over your commodities and convert it to whatever use he so desires. And on the flip side, if you are able to repay your loan as at when due, you regain the custody of your commodities and warehouse receipt. And for the last point on the functionality of the warehouse receipt, you can exploit, a trader can hold on to his commodities for a longer period of time to when the market price is in his favor, unlike when you have to sell immediately after harvest due to lack of storage facilities. So these matters have been enumerated. They're actually in practice, but the only gap is that they weren't identified in the current legal framework. But this proposed law identifies them with crystal clarity.
Yeah, quite a lot to unpack there. But we see the Nigerian commodities market has been perceived as high risk. How will the ISB help de-risk commodities trading in Nigeria?
Okay. So we have mentioned the fact that gaps have been identified and their laws have been made to fill these lacunas. The ISB, in its bid to de-risk the ecosystem, now goes further to provide extreme penal measures to punish violations and infringement of these stated laws. So these penal measures are meant to serve as deterrents against the violation of these standards and framework. And to mention a few instances that are even related to the issues I've earlier discussed. If you are caught operating a Ponzi scheme in Nigeria, you'll be liable on conviction to a term of imprisonment not less than 10 years. If you are caught altering the content of a receipt, of a warehouse receipt, in such a way that it conveys false statement or misrepresentation, you'll be liable, the company will be liable on conviction to a fine of not less than 20 million naira. And every director and principal officer in that company will also be liable to a fine of not less than 10 million naira each, or a term of imprisonment of not less than 7 years. If you are caught issuing a warehouse receipt for goods that you have not received with intention to commit fraud, you also be liable on conviction to the same severity of penalty. So in its bid to de-risk the investment ecosystem, it's instituted and provided for extreme penal measures to dissuade people from violating these laid down standards.
I guess the only risk is you buying, at the wrong time and losing your money, I guess. But, this bill is set to, confer new investigative and enforcement powers to regulatory bodies. How can these bodies ensure stakeholder compliance?
Okay, that's an intricate question. So one thing is very critical and central to stakeholder compliance, and that is stakeholder engagement. That is interaction between a regulator and the key stakeholders in that ecosystem. Now, when any law is passed, it is incumbent and imperative of the principal regulator to enlighten, educate, and intimate the key stakeholders in that ecosystem of the new development in law. And this can be done through, by organizing fora like seminars, conferences, symposia, and even through the media outlet of the principal regulator. Because laws are not made for regulators. They are not just made for regulators. They are made for individuals, businesses, key stakeholders, and they must be made aware of the new development. And at the same time, they must be preached to on the importance of compliance and the attendant consequences of non-compliance. That is on one hand. Now, for the second point, which is also important as the first point, is the fact that, from what your question even insinuated, SEC has been given or arrogated more power, more enforcement power. The fines SEC can now issue now, they are exponentially higher than before. So, by the virtue of the severity of those fines, you are ordinarily spellbound to abide by the regulations, because when you consider the extremity of those fines, using an example, if you alter the content of a warehouse receipt, knowing fully well that every principal officer in your company may undergo 7 years imprisonment, apart from the 10 million naira fine each person would pay. That is a sufficient dissuading factor for a company that believes in working within the confines of ethics and global business, global best practices. And for the last point, SEC has been also empowered to be able to conduct surveillance. They have the power to inspect a company, whether it's on-site or off-site. They have the power to summon any principal officer or worker in a company. If they believe that person has a reliable information on whatever may be the subject of inquiry or investigation of SEC. So when you consider the total interpretation of all these factors, they are sufficient to ensure the compliance of key stakeholders. And concluding with the ultimate aim of this bill, which is to restore investor confidence, reclaim the integrity of the Nigerian capital market, so much so that every potential investor, be it local or foreign, can confidently, without undue hesitation, decide to pool his fund in the Nigerian capital markets.
Right, I guess all parties have a role to play with the ISB. Thank you so much. That was Oladipupo Eluera, the legal analyst at AFEX. Thank you so much for giving us your perspective today.
All right. Thank you very much, Oladi, for having me.